Christianity is not, never truly was, about morality, except secondarily. Bruce Charlton. Over the past 8 years, my reading of and brooding on the fourth Gospel, called John, has had many and profound effects on my understanding of the differences between what Jesus said and did, and the Christian churches that came after. In particular, that the core of Jesus' work was to provide men with the possibility of resurrected eternal life in heaven. This means that the primary concern of Jesus was to save mankind from entropy and death, therefore Jesus' primary concern was not to save us from evil. To repeat, for Jesus, salvation means from death, not from evil. However, most of religion before, during and since the time of Jesus is about morality, about the behavior and attitudes of people. Such religion is therefore therapeutic. It is about minimizing suffering and or maximizing human happiness in this world and mortal life. That is what all those laws and rules are about, the propitiations offered to divinity, the abasements and obedience. They are trying to make this world a better place, and ourselves to have a better place in it. And this is why all religions have considerable overlap in the approved behaviors. But this was not what Jesus was about. Jesus came essentially to save us from death, not from moral sin. Jesus was primarily against death, not evil, but his cure for death was also a cure for evil. For Jesus the problem of death, of entropy, was more profound than that of evil, because in this mortal life and world, death is absolutely universal and completely unavoidable. Destructive change may be slowed, but is always at work. Jesus was necessary and unique because he offered a solution to death, not because of his moral teaching, not because of his moral laws and principles, not because people could make a church from the moral laws and principles. This was and is very difficult to grasp, because most people, including most early Christians, including those who formed the Christian churches, apparently, want morality. Or else they want immortality now in this world, and without dying first. People do not, therefore, usually want what Jesus actually offered. Or, at least, they think they don't want it, or they do not want it as strongly and urgently as they want other things, such as relief from suffering, or happiness now or soon. But relief from suffering and positive happiness in this mortal life are not the core of Jesus' message, because these are promised for post-mortal resurrected life, not for this life. The error of making Christianity primarily moral distorted it from very early, and has led to its current near destruction. Those who made Christianity continuous with Judaism, including the authors of the Matthew and Luke Gospels, and Paul, tried to conflate the primacy of resurrection with their continued primacy of morality, leading eventually to the bizarre concoction of original sin, in order to pseudo-explain why Jesus was both unique and necessary. In other words, they made Jesus primarily about morality, and resurrection was made conditional upon the approved morality. And morality was made to be why Jesus came, and curing morality was made to be what Jesus fundamentally did. This world morality was made of core importance to the Christian churches, and morality was made to come first, such that resurrection was relegated to a secondary status as reward for good morality. But morality is about this world, here and now and before death. Whereas the advent of resurrection was of cosmic and eternal significance, it is a change in the nature of reality. Everybody everywhere has their ideas of proper morals, and this is continually contested. And morality does not require resurrection. So morality is both regarded as primary by almost everybody, yet morality is detachable from the reality of Christianity. And morality has, in fact, already been detached from Christianity, even or rather, especially, in those lands historically, or nominally still, Christian. As of here and now, Christianity is just one of many competing this worldly moral systems, and gets evaluated in terms of its material success in producing good behavior. But if we are talking about Jesus Christ, rather than social institutions and traditions, then this is wrong, a mistake, an ancient error. Jesus brought the possibility of resurrected eternal life in heaven, and that fact should come first and foremost, and be kept at the core of our Christian discussion and teaching. Spiritual atmosphere. William Wildblood. Certain places, even in today's world, retain an atmosphere that speaks of a reality beyond the everyday and the mundane. There are natural sites that have this quality, and these were often adopted as sacred places in bygone days by our pagan forefathers. Springs, wells, mountains, caves and many other naturally occurring features were marked out by a sense of presence which indicated that a god or spirit of some kind was in attendance. Nowadays we might be inclined to think of this, if existing at all, as a phenomenon associated with earth energies, perhaps coming from a geological peculiarity or even mineral deposit of some sort, but our ancestors always associated sacredness with spirits. That is to say, with beings either from another world or another dimension of this one. Some places have a sacred aura, but others can acquire that aura by the action of human beings who gather there to worship and pray. I say action, but contemplation might be a better word, as the spiritual power engendered by contemplation can build up and imbue its environment with a special quality that is detectable to the sensitive soul. Places of worship can have this property, and they are often designed to help in its creation with their high ceilings and vaults on the one hand and enclosed sanctuaries on the other, bringing to mind the open sky on a mountain top or a deep, dark cave representing respectively the Father and Mother of creation. These spaces can then receive and hold the power built up the worshippers. This was the genius of architects of the past that their descendants in our day have either lost or failed to understand. The atmosphere is not created by the architecture but can be supplemented by it, and it does not depend just on the ritual but the ritual and attitude of the worshippers, both together. A ritual can be designed to build up power, but it will only be properly effective if the participants attend with their heart and spirit as well as their mind and body. I suppose it is possible that a modern church can have a spiritual atmosphere, but it is unlikely due to its construction being based on secular/materialist principles and its lack of connection to the transcendent principle. Not to mention its ugliness. I once met a monk who told me that it doesn't matter what the outer form in which you worship is like, it's the worship that counts. The silly fellow meant well, but he was ignorant. In that case, why did people put so much energy into building stone hymns to the Creator? Of course, a loving heart can worship anywhere, but the outer affects the inner just as the inner affects the outer, and to dismiss beauty as irrelevant shows a dead spirit. The grandeur of a Gothic cathedral is not required, as a pure simplicity can be just as effective in its own way, but harmonious proportions and natural materials are important if one wishes to create a holy space in which to connect to the divine. Beauty is part of God just as much as love and wisdom. 3 places come to mind for me as environments where I have felt a strong spiritual atmosphere. There are many more I could add, but these 3 form a good cross-section, being illustrative of different types of atmosphere. I am referring to man-made places only here, so leaving out examples from the natural world. The first is the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid of Giza. The first time I went there was 1978, and I was fortunate enough to be left on my own for a while in the dark center of the structure. There was a slight artificial light, but I shut my eyes and was absorbed by the stillness and silence around me. There was a sense of extraordinary antiquity, as though one had been taken back to the beginning of things before form of any kind developed. This was the very ground of creation, but also the seat of the tiny seed of spirit at the core of the heart from which all life grows. For a moment I felt myself to be entering the originating point of mystery, and returned to where all things began. The second place was Akbar's tomb, which is the mausoleum of the Mughal Emperor Akbar in Sikandra, just outside Agra. When I first went there in 1979, I felt as if part of me knew this place and I had a right to be there, though I am not claiming a past life as a Mughal courtier. This was just a feeling, but it was a happy one, and it came over me as I walked along the path that led through the quadrangular charbagh, representing the Garden of Paradise, up to the mausoleum. At the southern entrance to the tomb there was the most beautifully decorated vestibule with geometrical patterns picked out in delicate blue and vivid gold, and then, in stark contrast, you entered a dark passage leading to the plain, unadorned central chamber that was Akbar's cenotaph. Here at the dim light under a high vaulted ceiling an attendant sounded the Muslim call to prayer. It echoed and resounded throughout the chamber, lasting for several seconds before gradually dying away, and, in that environment, seemed like the voice of God calling all the worlds into being out of the darkness of primeval space. If the inside of the Great Pyramid was like the time before creation, this resembled a microscopic scale version of the creative moment at the beginning of time. My third example of spiritual atmosphere comes from Verona in 1987. It was in one of the numerous old churches in that city, though unfortunately I can't remember which. There are a few examples here. I was there as a tourist, visiting the various sites as tourists do. There is a 1st century Roman amphitheatre in an excellent state of repair and still used for opera performances, and then there is the Casa di Giulietta with its balcony that is certainly not authentic but serves as a touching homage to young love. There are also several Romanesque and Gothic churches such as the Basilica di San Zeno Maggiore and the Chiesa di Santa Anastasia, which is stuffed full of extraordinary artworks. But it may have been while visiting one of the city's smaller churches that I opened a door to a little side chapel and was hit by a wave of such power that I almost fell back. It was rather like exiting the air-conditioned interior of a plane in the tropics when the outside heat suddenly crashes into you. A guide told me that monks had conducted a service there shortly before, and the after effects of that service were certainly a testimony to the intensity of their worship. Although I had once encountered something similar at Cor Abbey on the Isle of Wight, I had not previously appreciated the extent to which true worship can build up an atmosphere so strong it seems almost a physical thing. If the previous experiences had brought to mind the early days of the universe, this one was different in that it spoke of the reciprocal love of God and man. It also seemed noticeably Christian and was a reminder that not all experiences called spiritual are necessarily the same thing. People have not even begun to wake up to the implications of subfertility. Bruce Charlton. When I recently wrote about the severe and increasing subfertility of the populations of all developed societies in the world, I had not realized that this was becoming a topic in the mass media. Sort of. Because the discussions reveal that people have not even begun to consider the implications of subfertility. The implications of subfertility go way beyond the currently permissible discussions of human psychology, sociology, and economics. The true implications are biological. They affect people as functional and reproductive beings. Fertility is a big topic, much too big to summarize here, and it takes a fair while to think through, but the subject has been, I think, well understood by some people for some decades, and some outcomes of differential and subfertility are, I believe, baked in and highly predictable. Differences in average fertility is natural selection of human beings, and such differentials just are evolution in action. Subfertility is extinction, but a subfertile population suffers massive declines in functionality, long before the actual extinction, although of course this will also accelerate the extinction. I don't talk much about all this stuff, because people don't like to talk about it, and are enmeshed in their own feelings and their need for optimism in order to escape what would otherwise be despair. because those addicted to optimism do not want to know that the damage is largely done, and we are just awaiting for the implications to unfold. There is little that anybody can do about it, not least because nobody really wants to do anything about it. So much so, that the only reason to think about the subject at all, is if you really want to understand what is happening, and what will happen to human beings as biological creatures. And not may want to understand stuff, for its own sake. The disinformation is in the frame. Bruce Charlton. The main source of mass media disinformation is in the frame. No matter whether any specific claim is factual or a lie, we can be sure that all the facts and interpretations of events will always and without exception be falsely framed, because this has the effect of making the facts and interpretations irrelevant. For example, most socio-political news is framed in terms of personalities, particularly of leaders, but there are no leaders in the sense being assumed. The leaders who feature in media reports are all puppets. Some are docile middle managers, others are psychopaths, some are demented and/or psychotic. Different puppets serve different purposes for those with real power. A favorite frame is, of course, that important events arise from the motivations and interactions of an assortment of leader puppets. The resulting pseudo-drama, apparently, magnetically attracts, endlessly fascinates, and powerfully motivates almost everybody in the world, to the point that most people shape their convictions, structure their lives, and base their hopes around these marionette dramas. Such leaders are never the source and implementing force of real and important policies. Indeed, the real and important policies, and indeed events, are themselves out with the media mainstream frame, and must be inferred, and will probably never be known in detail. The advantage of false framing is obvious. Because the official media frame is always false, and the false frames are, anyway, changed whenever this is expedient, then all analysis of problems, and suggested/rational solutions of problems, are thereby rendered false, because irrelevant to reality. False framing is therefore by far the most effective form of disinformation, and one that is literally impossible to combat within the mass media, since any true framing that happens to be featured, whether deliberately, or because of error or incompleteness of control, is thereby itself framed as just another theory. Itself to be discussed within the prevalent frame. So long as people attend to, and attempt to influence, the mass media, they cannot escape the consequences of false framing. Reality can be known, insofar as it is knowable, only by individual persons in person-to-person communication, and the alternative media, no matter how genuinely out with the establishment, is nonetheless just another part of the system. We need to accept that, here and now, in public discourse there is never a critical mass of people who are honest and informed on any issue. Truth is only valued, hence pursued, by interpersonal groups of individuals, each one of whom is thinking intuitively, and taking responsibility for his ultimate discernments and assumptions. Because of false framing, anything institutional, or functioning institutionally, or aspiring to institutional nature, is necessarily system assimilated as of now. This should be accepted and worked around, rather than the endless round resource-wasting, futile, and counterproductive attempts or recommendations, to build/rebuild honest functional institutions. The desperate appeal of deus ex machina. Bruce Charlton. Deus ex machina is a term used to describe the plot device by which intervention from outside the action appears just before some catastrophic disaster, and solves an apparently impossible problem. In real life, deus ex machina has long formed the basis of optimism, the hope that something not known, or known but previously inactive, will emerge unexpectedly to save us. Or to put it negatively, despair may be staved off by hoping that something will turn up. This may, of course, be true. Because we really do not know or understand much about how the world works, so there is never reason to give up hope. But hope is not the same as optimism, and it is a very different thing to hope for rescue than it is to expect rescue by some unknown event. In particular, it is foolish to construct a specific hope from a logical sequence of double negative assertions. For example, that, for all we know, we cannot be sure that Leader X isn't really a genuine savior, who is, despite superficial appearances, cleverly plotting behind the scenes towards some kind of decisive last-minute masterstroke. Or, spiritually, the worse the world is apparently getting, and the weaker and more corrupt my church seems to be, nobody can disprove that this won't make it more likely that the deity will, at last, step in, make a personal intervention, and save things in some unexpected fashion. Such a saving might itself be negative, as in saving from the default of hell, or it might be positive in the sense of establishing a redeemed church as dominant and pervasive across society. Such reflections were provoked by my again considering the, in retrospect, extraordinary optimism that was prevalent among spiritual people in the years approaching and just following the millennium. Among many almost such people existed a near consensus that the whole world was shortly to be raised to a higher spiritual level, higher frequency or vibrational level, that would affect everybody and everything, like it or not. Although the more discerning in the New Age clearly acknowledged that for this external influx to be effective would also require a receptivity, or even some positive spiritual move, from each individual, in order to meet this incoming spiritual energy halfway. So an element of at least consent, and probably collaboration, was also required. Nonetheless, the primary cause was a new, or greatly amplified, external influence. My interpretation of this apparently anachronistic millennial expectation is that it was the product of a kind of desperation, especially among those genuinely spiritual people who had rejected, or simply did not believe, Jesus' offer of reasserted eternal heavenly life. And, mutatis mutandis, I think the same applies to the optimism, as contrasted with hope, of so many of those Christians who are serious and motivated about their faith. The Christians who believe in some kind of external saving of this mortal life and the earth, are guilty of conflating the true and sure hope of heaven, with a false optimism concerning this world. This false optimism among Christians seems particularly pernicious, insofar as it entails God intervening to save, what seems to me, the most deeply evil civilization the world has yet known. I mean a civilization that is already, and increasingly, strategically and officially inverted in its values. The answer is simple, but difficult, and is to strive to be motivated primarily by next worldly hope rather than this worldly optimism, and to root this in the faith that God will, indeed, by Jesus, already has, made it possible for anybody and everybody, in whatever situation, time, or place, to attain salvation. The next inference is more controversial among Christians, which is that this can only be attained by taking personal responsibility for salvation. In other words, I am assuming that there will be no worldwide, or even culture-wide, deus ex machina intervention, because everything has already been done, and all that remains is for us as individuals is to recognize that reality, and to make our commitment, to choose to follow Jesus. That is the essential starting point. And then, we each need to discover what that actually means for us specifically, here and now. Contrary to what I have long believed, the spring equinox is not the time after which days become longer than nights. Bruce Charlton. I have always supposed that on the day of the spring equinox, i.e. yesterday, the name and night both became 12 hours long, or, at least, it was the day in which they were most equal, so that the next day was the first on which the day was longer than the night. But this is not true, as I realized when I was checking the sunrise and sunset times. It turns out that on March 20th, the day of the vernal equinox, there were 12 hours and 10 minutes of daylight, and the most equal date with regard to day-night was either the 17th, 11:58-hour day, or 18th, 12:02-hour day. So I was wrong about the definition of an equinox, which is actually when the sun rises in due east and sets due west. And also when the sun is positioned exactly above the equator, but that would never have been apparent to people up here at 55 degrees north. When I think about it, I already knew about the east-west definition, but had assumed that this also meant that day and night were equal length, and the day length aspect of it seemed to be more important. Furthermore, I'm pretty sure I have been told that the vernal equinox was the exact time of year when light began to overcome dark. A very poetic, not to say spiritual, conceit. Well, I guess the timing is close enough for government work, but I am rather sad that it is not, after all, exact. And it emphasizes my cumulative recognition that exact astronomical measures are not humanly valid segmentations of time. The reality is more like a phase or season, and we ought not to make as much of specific days as we typically do. Romantic and Christian, both are needed for sufficient motivation, requisite courage. Bruce Charlton. Romantic and Christian, both are needed. Christianity comes first, because it is the structure of reality. But without romanticism, well, Christianity does not involve us, each, personally, powerfully. Without the romantic and personal involvement, then Christianity is just theory and/or just a social institutions. And, as of here and now, such a not romantic Christianity will not motivate us sufficiently to resist the pervasive and otherwise overwhelming evil of our civilization. On paper, or legal, or social religion, including Christianity, has been demonstrated to be radically insufficient. Its adherents, no matter how strident, are actually engaging in mainstream atheist materialist cultural activities. Whatever they spout or assert, and no matter of what they have convinced themselves, they actually are doing nothing more than socializing, doing politics, seeking status, or an economic niche, or survival, or pursuing some other of those things that everybody does, and is encouraged to do, in the mainstream of ideology. Such theoretically/legalistic/institutional not romantic Christianity is literally irrelevant. It is spiritually indistinguishable from the atheism, agnosticism or anything but Christianity spirituality. Not romantic Christianity is no better than the prevalent values of our society. And, what this means in practice, is that non-romantic Christians will not choose the actuality of salvation after their mortal lives, for the simple reason that there are other things they want more than salvation. And because they have assimilated the value inversions and anti-creation values of the actual Western civilization into which their churches are thoroughly assimilated. To recognize this fact, we need to understand that things really were different in the past, because people were intrinsically different. Romanticism, the need for a personal and passionate engagement with life, was not really a thing at all, until the late 1700s, and did not spread at all widely for another century. In the more remote past, especially in the medieval era and before, all religion was social in nature, and for men of that era it was potentially very powerfully motivating. Personal engagement, motivation. These things just happened, spontaneously, or by passive acceptance. Indeed, such religion with such people was for centuries, millennia, the single most powerful motivator in life, such that individuals were extremely courageous in loyalty to their church. In many religions, men would risk and indeed sacrifice much in adherence to the Christian church. Even monarchs, certainly not the best of men, could be remarkably courageous. While Henry VIII was a monster of pride, lust and spite, his children, Mary, Elizabeth, Edward VI, all displayed tremendous individual courage and tenacity in pursuit of their religious convictions. Even when, especially in the case of Mary and Elizabeth, they found themselves isolated, their lives in danger, and with all the powers of the state and institutional church ranged against them, each continued to be loyal to, and risked everything for, what he or she regarded as the true church. Such motivation is now gone, and long gone. Such courage in loyalty to a religious vision is now a thing of the past. What was an automatic, passive, spontaneous involvement in Christianity, must now actively be sought as a personal necessity, a lifelong quest. This is necessary if a Christian is to find the motivation necessary to transcend the endemic evils of Western civilization. 2026. Ancestor worship. William Wildblood. This blog is called Meeting the Masters, which indicates its origins, but I don't write much these days about the spiritual beings I call the Masters. That is partly because my experience with them ended over 25 years ago, though perhaps I should say my conscious experience, since I believe they are still a factor in my life, just one of which I am not outwardly aware. That means they could be a factor in many people's inner lives, acting as guides and instructors. Perhaps we contact them in sleep, or perhaps they communicate on the spiritual plane in the form of impressions which we then must pick up and interpret as best we can. That way we can grow as individuals because we are responsible for ourselves. This leads to the other reason for me not writing much about the Masters now. This is my blog, and while I do think they have prompted me from time to time, I do not know what might come from them and what comes from me. I am neither a medium nor a messenger, which is as it should be in the modern world in which we are called to the path of spiritual adulthood. Enough of that. What I thought I might do here is examine what the Masters are and how they stand to us, and I say us because although I may have had the experience of talking to them in my younger days, that doesn't mean I am associated with them more than anyone else. If, as I believe, they represent the teachers of humanity, under Christ, then any spiritual aspirant is associated with them to some degree. We all have our teachers and guides in the higher worlds. So, what then are the Masters? First off, they told me to think of them as messengers from God, and I do. But that just describes their function. What are they in themselves? I have considered this, and I have decided that the best way to think of them is as spiritual ancestors. The group that spoke to me would be my ancestors and, no doubt, the ancestors of many others, but other people might have other, different but similar, groups as their ancestors. As above, so below runs the famous saying. Everything true, natural and good in this world is a reflection of a higher reality. We have biological families and ancestors, and I am sure we also have spiritual families and ancestors. Not linked by blood as in this world, but by something else, which would be a similar point of spiritual origin, meaning here origin of the soul, the individual component of our being. There will be a spiritual version of blood, perhaps some quality of light, and this is what binds spiritual families together. Sometimes these families may coincide with our earthly families, but sometimes not, for reasons of learning, since that is what we come here to do. What a wonderful thought it is to know that we have a loving family in the higher worlds, one to which we completely belong and from which we cannot be separated. The bond is actually closer than to any earthly family, since spirit is thicker than blood. The Masters then are the senior members of that family. They are our spiritual ancestors, which is why we owe them honor and respect. They have gone before us on the journey of life and reached the destination, or destination as it applies to the human state. There is no point at which spiritual growth and expansion stops as long as life is in a state of manifestation. Heaven cannot be a static place because it combines being, eternity, the absolute, stillness, oneness, with becoming, change, development, growth, variety, individuals, to make something more than either of these on their own. Love comes out of that. Can there be love in pure being, absolute oneness? In the pagan past we venerated our ancestors, and this was a good instinct. Sometimes we thought of ourselves as descended from the gods, or some of us at any rate, and I see this as founded in something real too. The gods in this sense might be those who have gone before us, who have achieved, and this is how I perceive the masters. They are forerunners who have done what we are trying to do. They are the realized end of the human state, which is attainable by all of us, if we do the work. I like to look at the origin of words to see what the root meaning behind their current meaning might be. The modern English word worship derives from the Old English worsipi, meaning the condition, sype, of being worthy, worth, hence of being due honor or respect. With that in mind, thinking of the masters in terms of ancestor worship seems appropriate. You might say, what need have we of such beings if we have Jesus? And that is a fair point, but I would counter that Jesus worked through his disciples as well as directly, so the one does not preclude the other. Which animals are magical? Bruce Charlton. There are individual exceptions either way, but for an animal to be magical or not, doesn't correlate with whether that beast is good or not. While magic, as such, is a good thing in the sense of being better than life lived at a mundane, everyday, non-experiential and alienated fashion, there is plenty of magic in the world that is malign in intent and or effect. Nonetheless, some kinds of animal are magical, while others are not, and this helps explain people's attitudes to them. It can work positively or negatively. For some people like and seek magical experience, while others hate, fear, and avoid it. So we can start by stating that cats are magical creatures, but dogs are not, and this has much to do with the well-known pattern of human types that are often divided between cat or dog lovers. Sheep and especially goats are magical, but cows are not, and neither are pigs, despite that oracular pigs feature in the Mabinogion. Owls are magical, and so are corvids, especially ravens and magpies, swallows and swifts, but pigeons are not, neither are most songbirds, nor are ducks. Bears are magical, and so are hares, badgers, red squirrels, and moles, but shrews, mice and rates are not magical. And so on. Discuss among yourselves. ETs, the question of contact with extraterrestrial humanoid life forms. Bruce Charlton. Much as with UFOs, I have read a fair bit about ET contacts, and viewed documentaries or videos, and various of my pen friends have described their own ET contacts, so my attitude has been somewhat open to the reality of such things. But this openness in principle has been modified by an underlying lack of interest in the subject, which is itself a reaction against the enormous, sometimes cosmically vast and spiritual, claims of significance made by ET proponents, whether positive or negative. Furthermore, there is the problem that I don't believe most of the claims, or at least, I am not confident of their validity. Some reports seem to be lies, while other experiences seem to be self-deceptions due to illness or stupidity, while other people seem to reporting genuine spiritual or paranormal experiences, but may be misinterpreting other kinds of experiences as ET contacts. In particular, to believe ET reports requires for me a confidence in the discernment, including spiritual discernment, of the witness, and up until now I had not come across any ET reports that ticked all the necessary boxes. This has changed since I read To Think Without Fear, The Challenge of the Extra-Terrestrial, 2015, by Anthony Duncan, 1930 to 2003, which has convinced me of the validity of his report of ET contacts happening to himself and family, in the middle 1990s in Northumberland, where he was an Anglican priest. Although, as a Church of England vicar of several parishes, at times Anthony Duncan lived near to me and I walked past his churches frequently, I never met him and did not know about him. Indeed, I did not become a Christian until after he had died. I came across Duncan rather vaguely at first through an interest in Celtic Christianity, a subject about which he wrote several books, but mainly through my reading of Gareth Knight and Eastleigh Keith's superb autobiography, I Called It Magic, 2011. Duncan and Knight met when Anthony Duncan was curate at Tewkesbury Abbey while Gareth Knight lived in the town, and Anthony Duncan prepared Knight for confirmation into the Church of England. They rapidly became friends and then complementary collaborators, ultimately leading Anthony Duncan to an interest in the Kabbalah that eventually bore fruit in Duncan's The Christ, Psychotherapy and Magic, 1969, which fed into Knight's restoration of Christian ceremonial magic in Experience of the Inner Worlds, 1975. Duncan was a natural, spontaneous, psychic and mystic, who had paranormal as well as supernatural experiences throughout his adult life. He was an officially recognized exorcist in the Church of England, and became a canon of Newcastle Cathedral. I read Gareth Knight's memoir of Anthony Duncan, Christ and Kabbalah, 2013, and then several of Anthony Duncan's books and a recorded lecture, before tackling To Think Without Fear TTWF. So I already liked and respected Duncan, before reading the ET book. However, it needed 2 attempts to get through TTWF, because of the rather unfortunate way it is structured. The key parts that actually convinced me of the validity of his interpretations of his experiences, the descriptions of his ET experiences, come at the very end of the volume, in the appendices. Before which I needed to wade through a great deal of complex, abstract, and, from my point of view, theologically unconvincing explanations and justifications of the reality of ETS from the context of mainstream Orthodox Anglican philosophy and doctrine, with various eclectic additions. There are, however, many important insights scattered throughout these rather turgid early parts, and the effort of penetrating these chapters surely prepared my receptivity for the simple and clear expositions that came at the end. Despite all its defects, what made this the only account to convince me of the reality of an ET experience was that background of already knowing and respecting Duncan, plus my confidence that he was able, from considerable experience reflected upon, to discern the provenance of strange experiences. In other words, Duncan had throughout his adult Christian life, experienced many contacts and communication involving angels, demons, ghosts and the like, and therefore he was exceptionally well placed and able to discern that these ETs were what they said they were. Anthony Duncan was also well motivated, i.e. not trying to gain personal advantage from reporting ET contacts. Indeed, he did not share the experiences described in this book outside the circles of his friends, and this book was not published until a decade after his death. In brief, the nature of the ET contacts, confirmed by 2 other people, was a non-visual but definite sense of presences, various numbers, and of various types of personage, and a direct, usually non-verbal, mind-to-mind telepathic, back and forth, Q&A type, understanding. So, having been convinced, what then? For me, nothing much more than an expansion of metaphysical possibility. I remain largely uninterested by such contacts, and have no significant desire to share them. The claims variously made in other books etc. of a strategic importance of ETS for mankind, material and or spiritual, seem to me to have been refuted by the passage of decades. Such discussion is contaminated by geopolitical forms of thinking about civilizational purposes, clashes, alliances and the like. I think the real significance, and this seems to be the opinion of Anthony Duncan, is interpersonal. The significance depends on the actual parties involved, the specific human and the specific ET, who seem to vary in kind and motivation, and the quality of what happens between them. Contact with ETs is therefore as important, or as trivial, as contact with other kinds of living beings, whether living or dead, material or spiritual. That is to say, genuinely loving contact between beings, if this develops, is eternally significant and of positive value to divine creation. Whereas contacts that have an instrumental purpose, in which one or both parties are attempting to use the other for some benefit, or from mere curiosity, or operating under orders, are net harmful interactions, but usually just insignificant, in the wider scheme. The vital importance of personal creativity, God, Heaven, Resurrection. Bruce Charlton. Virtue in traditional Christianity, indeed in traditional religion, is about obedience to external deity, service to the will of a deity. Creativity is in fact the product of deity, and it may be regarded as the monopoly of deity. Traditional religion does not have a central place for creativity by men. Especially not by individual men. Especially not by all individual men. Indeed, within ancient religions, creativity may be regarded as being an impossibility, and the belief in the possibility of creativity as a delusion. Given that everything has already been done, or conceived of, by the deity, there is simply no space for individual creativity to exist when God is regarded as omni-everything. Even when regarded as a genuine possibility, creativity is seen as, at best, an optional extra. But more often it is at least a significant temptation to sin, and the impulse for creativity may even be itself regarded as a sin, for example by pretending to, usurping, displacing the divine prerogative. Yet, if it is acknowledged that creativity is an innate, and inevitable fact of agency or freedom, properly understood as a positive phenomenon, then trivialization, denial, or demonization of creativity has a dreadful and distorting effect on religion. At best this leads to a self-contradicting doublethink, in which creativity is so framed as to deny its reality. At worst it leads to a tyrannical attempt to thwart innate humanness and crush all individual people into becoming functional parts of a social machine, a machine that is asserted to be dedicated to divine service. Then this crushing, and all which it entails, is labeled as good. And insofar as the soul cries against it and yearns for more and better, well, that is just more sin. My interpretation is that there always was human creativity, because, for me, creativity is what each individual being brings to divine creation, simply by virtue of his uniqueness participating in the ongoing work of creating. So, there always was creativity, but it used to be unconscious, implicit, unidentified as such, hence deniable, hence relabeled as obedient service. What happened increasingly through the modern era, and by now is almost universal, is that individual creativity has become conscious, and therefore often deliberate and purposive. So that when creativity is trivialized, denigrated, thwarted, excluded, or suppressed nowadays by any religion, modern individuals are much more likely to realize, and be aware why they feel crushed, why they feel fundamentally dissatisfied. 'Tis is one deep reason why any such religion feels wrong. Traditional and orthodox Christian theology does not take human creativity seriously enough to account for it, nor to recognize that creativity is absolutely central to the nature of Christian salvation. For example, an afterlife without creation is not heaven but something else. In a sense, creativity is what resurrection is for. Resurrection retains our individuality, hence agency, of self, whereas the self is explicitly discarded, and indeed vilified, by many other religious or spiritual afterlives. A self-styled Christianity that lacks a proper place for individual creativity, will likewise end up discarding, and demonizing, the self. Resurrected eternal life in heaven is for creation, when creation is understood as an intrinsic aspect of love. Love is of and between individuals, and creativity is part of what we do about this. Put differently, creativity is each individual being participating in the purposes and processes of divine creation, harmonized by a spirit of love. Because traditional Christian theology was devised in a world where creativity was unconscious, the fact it has no place for personal creativity went unnoticed for many centuries. But now it is evident that traditional Christian theology is wrong, exactly because it does not allow for the central necessity, and goodness, of individual creativity. We therefore need a new metaphysical understanding of Christianity, one in which creativity is explicitly recognized as occupying a central and vital place. What do you want from a religion/ideology? Bruce Charlton. It strikes me that different people want very different things from their religion, or, more often nowadays, their ideology. Many people now, and always perhaps, understand their religion in terms of this worldly benefit. In other words, they believe, or, at least, hope, that the practice of the religion makes this mortal life better, either positively good or less bad. What better means is various by times and places. Nowadays better usually means feels better, so that religion is seen as a kind of pastime or therapy. In the past, such as in the Old Testament, it meant having more power/status/wealth, avoiding catastrophe, winning a battle, escaping slavery and the like. Typically, such a religion of this worldly benefit is at bottom fear-motivated, and propitiatory in nature. Such a religion broadly becomes a matter of contracts or deals made between the deity, and the mediator of deity, and the individual. If I do this for you, you must do this for me, or vice versa. If you want this outcome, you need to follow these rules. If you want to avoid this happening, you must refrain from that. Again, you can see this in the Old Testament, and, of course, in many other religions, and, of course, this has been the nature of most of Christianity for most of history. Because, many people who regard themselves as Christians, from the highest levels of churches to the most ignorant of the laity, continue to want and practice exactly this kind of this worldly religion while calling it Christian. And they have made, and continue to mark a Christianity into this kind of this worldly religion, probably because that is what they most want from their religion. Then there are questions of purpose and meaning. A lot of people want a sense of meaning in life. They want to know that what they desire, think and do has a meaning beyond itself, that the bits and pieces of a life are connected into some kind of pattern or system. And when people begin to suspect or believe that their lives are arbitrary, to suspect that it does not really matter what they do because each thing is disconnected from each other thing, then this leads to despair. But despair is intolerable. If immediate suicide is not chosen, then such people, most people, apparently in Western civilization, seek escape from the despair of meaninglessness into hedonism, or at least into not thinking distraction. It turns out that meaning requires purpose. So our lives need to have purpose. However, not all purposes suffice. When the supposed purpose of life is confined within the boundaries of mortal life itself, i.e. that life between conception/birth and biological death, then such purpose makes no ultimate difference to the question of meaning. meaning in life, restricted to mortal life only, is just a delayed form of despair. If purpose is just a matter of what happens to us during the period of mortal life, and then this is followed by annihilation, then the end result is just a modified version of trying to live a life of meaning without purpose. The difference of having a mortal purpose for life rather than no purpose at all, is merely that with mortal meaning our escape from despair into hedonism/distraction just becomes longer term. A matter of blocking awareness of despair over the time span of our expected mortal life, rather than here and now hedonism/escape. Meaning in mortal life merely leads to what might be termed enlightened hedonism, which is the main mortality in the world today. Sometimes called utilitarianism. I conclude that we must have a purpose in our lives that extends beyond the boundaries of our mortal life. I further believe that for such a purpose to have meaning, entails that we each have a personal role to play in this purpose. Religions that explain everything in terms of the purposes of deity exclude any role for the individual, hence they offer purpose, but a purpose without individual meaning. Such purpose without meaning religions include almost all the religions of the world in their official capacity, including almost all of the Christian denominations and churches. Their most fundamental explanations of reality exclude any participation of individual persons in the divine purposes, therefore they offer purpose without meaning. This is why off-the-peg religions of the churches, and their mandatory metaphysical assumptions, their ready-made theologies, their compulsory philosophies, are of their nature insufficient. They do not, and more importantly they cannot, provide both purpose and meaning for our individual lives, when those lives are understood to encompass both this mortal life on earth, and personal life out with those bounds. Since we cannot simply choose what we need from the mass-produced corporate religions, if we want our life to have meaning as well as purpose, then we each must make our own religion, from that which we personally regard as the fundamental realities of existence. And this is not an exercise in subjective wishful thinking, because its basis is that the stakes are of the highest we can experience, purpose and meaning in our own extra-mortal and well as mortal lives. We need to deal with realities, therefore we need to identify these realities, and in the activity we cannot rely upon second-hand assertions. Unless we are content that our life be futile, the basis of such work needs to be that which we personally regard as the fundamentals, the truth of how things are. Ideology is the system of bottom-line evaluation, explanations and purposes of someone who is a materialist atheist. Ideology therefore does not replace religion, because its ultimate metaphysical assumptions concerning the nature of reality are already in place, whereas these are part of a religion. That despair is indeed intolerable can be regarded as a fact of the way we are made, leaving aside why or how we are made that way. The effects of despair can be seen in the self-hatred and strategic self-destruction of all the societies of the world that are conducted on the assumptions of atheistic materialism, which category includes, at least, all nations of the developed world, and all international groupings. Official churches and religions make only a quantitative, not qualitative, perceptible difference. It might be asked why this was not a problem in the past. My answer was that, before the modern era, human beings had a sense of meaning and purpose innately, spontaneously, and naturally. Much as young children do even nowadays. This was mostly unconscious and taken for granted, and people brought it with them to whatever religion they consciously adopted. The deficits of religion were therefore filled by this inbuilt sense of meaning purpose, even when the explicit doctrines contradicted it. Presumably, a dwindling residue of this unconscious innate meaning purpose has, diminishingly, sustained humanity through the explicitly atheist materialist assumptions and teachings of modernity, and explains why few people wholly live down to their expressed beliefs. Still residual, yet increasingly feeble, This is why modern motivation is radically insufficient. Western religious motivated wars, now. Ridiculous, nonsense, PSYOPS. Bruce Charlton. In the past, including in Western nations, there were religious wars, because religion was the primary motivator in many people's lives. For example, in the 16th and 17th century in the British Isles there were religious international and civil wars between Christians. It is very evident that, whatever other reasons there were to start and sustain wars, religion was primary. Back then and there, plenty of people, individually, as well as collectively, were strongly motivated, risked greatly, suffered greatly for their religion. But that was then, this is now? Things now are very different in modern, developed Western societies such as the USA and its vassal nations of UK, Europe etc. All Western and West-affiliated/dominated states are secular, without any exceptions. And this secular perspective goes far deeper than constitutional factors. Non-religious assumptions are fundamental and functional. Bureaucracy and mass media, which are everywhere in all modern states, are not just irreligious, but are innately, and increasingly, anti-religious. Nowadays people are evidently not primarily motivated by religion. Indeed, think of 2020, their religious practice almost invariably follows and reflects their atheist materialist ideology. The mainstream churches of all denominations and factions are just a lifestyle option located within the all-pervading secular leftism. Ideology, not religion, drives motivation, and ideology is a product of the totalitarian state, and its apparatus of bureaucracy, media, law, education, science, arts, military etc. This hegemonic Western ideology is negatively motivated by sins such as fear, resentment, despair. The ideology is therefore both incoherent and destructive in its ultimate basis, as well as its proximate effects. This is reflected in the nature of modern drone and missile distance warfare, in which attack is much easier than defense, indeed, in which effective defense is all but impossible to sustain. By its technical nature, such warfare is primarily destructive, and the destructive effect is enormously amplified by the ultra-complex and unavoidable interdependencies of modern developed societies. In one word, modern warfare is primarily spiteful in motivation. It is mainly concerned with the infliction of destruction of social and economic systems, with deliberate environmental destruction, with infliction of suffering and death on humans, animals, plants. Modern warfare is the material expression of our spiritual nihilism. Religions and churches in the West, 2026 are almost entirely assimilated as components of a top-down global totalitarian state, which for more than half a century has propagated a negative/inverted ideology and morality of opposition. And this is so grossly obvious, so widely observed and measured, so wearisomely often discussed and analyzed, that it ought to be instantly obvious that the currently circulating notion of the present war being religiously motivated is ridiculous nonsense. Indeed, the idea that modern West-initiated wars are religiously motivated, the idea that modern Americans would go to war for their religion is crazy. And that these fanatical Christian, or Judeo-Christian, religionists are actually imposing religious geopolitical priorities. Well, such beliefs are so utterly idiotic that they should immediately be recognized as PSYOPs of those agents of chaos who increasingly dominate within the global establishment. But on the contrary, such tactics work. There are those not Christians who simply accept the evil nonsense because it confirms their own biases against Christians. There are those Christians who accept the evil nonsense because it confirms their own biases against evangelicals. There are those religionists who accept the evil nonsense because it creates an excuse for indulging their spiteful and destructive biases against other religions, ethnicities, nations. Religion is convenient excuse, and religious motivation, although too feeble to overcome secular ideology, is nonetheless. There are those who expend thousands of words on analyzing the extent to which the PSYOP is true, and the extent to which it is not, the extent to which all this is a product of deficits in theology, and then making complex, nuanced recommendations concerning what to do next about things, which will of course be ignored. This in itself is evidence of the way in which, in this innately entropic world, that is also in 2026 dominated and pervaded by the powers of purposive evil, destruction is much easier than creation. A small effort by Intel-Ops who, presumably, constructed and placed the concept of a modern Western religious war, has led to a very large socially destructive, psychologically negative, consequence. Things now are just all too easy for the powers of evil, because of the extent and consequences of spiritual corruption in the world mass populations. They merely need to pull at a string, and en masse we reliably panic, rant, dance, and destroy? A Dark Guru. William Wildblood. Previously in this series about my life in India during the 1980s, I've written about Europeans we knew but not much about Indians except in passing. But, of course, we knew many and were friends with several. There was Krishnamurti the tailor, who always wore a crisp white shirt and sharply pressed khaki trousers. Then there was Ali, who ran the Yercaud Club and who looked, I thought, like a benevolent crocodile. Dilip and Ashok were two brothers who, with their father, had a geranium plantation that produced an essential oil used for perfume and skincare. Subramaniam was one of many coffee planters in the area, and Romalingam lived in the bungalow next to ours. He fell on financial hard times, so leased the front of his house to the Bank of India, and moved to the back. It seemed to work for him. But our main friends, apart from the Matthews whom I have previously mentioned, were Mr. and Mrs. Neelakantan. He was a Brahmin, and had been well off, but he was persuaded to invest his money in a film studio which went bust and lost the lot, as a result of which he had come to Yercaud, where his wife Prema found work at one of the private schools in the town, enabling their sons, Kumar and Prakash, and daughter, Sudha, to get decent educations. They were all very bright and took full advantage of the opportunities offered. Neelakantan was probably in his mid to late 40s but retired, or, at any rate, no longer working, considering himself to be in the vanaprastha stage of life, which, according to Hindu teaching, is the third stage when one starts to withdraw from the world and focus one's energies more on moksha or liberation. He sought us out because he heard we were interested in spiritual matters, and we had many conversations, even debates, about Indian philosophy. He was a disciple of Swami Muktananda, who was a prominent guru of the day, teaching something called Siddha Yoga, which claimed to be able to awaken the Kundalini in its practitioners. Traditionally, this was a secret path only open to a dedicated few after years of spiritual discipline, but Muktananda offered the awakening to anyone, and Neelakantan said he had experienced it. It did not seem to have changed him in any significant way for the better though, and he admitted as much, which was more than many others who have undergone this experience are willing to do. Neelakantan gave me Muktananda's autobiography to read, and I could see that the man did have power of some sort, but it was also obvious that it was not true spiritual power. Like many Indian sannyasis, he had tapped into a form of occult energy through his guru, but this energy appeared more demonic than divine. And rather like Sai Baba, you only had to look at a photo of Muktananda to see a darkness in his soul. When the stories of his sexual misdemeanors came out, as almost inevitably they did, I was not surprised. There was a misconception of spirituality common at the time, which many of the gurus flooding the West took advantage of as they preyed on the naive. They may even have been victims of it themselves. It saw the spiritual in terms of consciousness, experience and power, and believed that the self could be transformed before it had been fully purified, and that what was required to do this was technique regardless of motivation. They would have spoken of proper motivation as one must to be taken seriously, but it was not put front and center as it should be and was often confused with aspiration. It was the old spiritual problem of the desire for heaven, even the greed for it, taking precedence over the love of God. It could not be denied that Muktananda had been through some extraordinary psychic experiences under his guru, but these cannot be regarded as spiritual in the proper sense because in cases of genuine spiritual transcendence the self is not splintered and shattered as happened to him. It is more a case of the ego falling away as it is outgrown, or melting in the light of the spiritual sun. There may be an initial pain and sense of loss, but there is not the violence and terror described by Muktananda which indicate that something other than divine forces is in play. Many Indian gurus mistake the occult for the spiritual, and Muktananda certainly did. Neelakantan admitted he had not been changed by his experiences, but others were not so lucky. A commenter on this blog a few years ago wrote that he had followed an Indian guru, unspecified but obviously Muktananda, who gave Shaktipat, which is a supposed infusion of grace that opens the Kundalini, and sends the energy upward through the chakras. He said he had had many amazing experiences, but even now long after he could not sit to meditate without being taken over by spontaneous pranayama and mudras, as well as the occurrence of strange mantras. He had left the guru's organization years before when the stories of scandal and abuse surfaced, but the psychic experiences persisted. He thought they could be the result of astral forces and wondered what to do. My opinion was that they were undoubtedly caused by the premature opening of psychic centers in the body which, it cannot be emphasized enough, is an occult procedure, not a spiritual one. The remedy is prayer and focus on Christ. This is the best way to cleanse the soul of the unhealthy psychic residues it picks up through these techniques. The moral of this story is that one should not be deceived by the spurious glamours, antinomian delusions and false promises of the left-hand path. The road to God is through purity and love, not magic in any form. I would not have suggested focus on Christ to Neelakantan, who was a proud Brahmin, and not going to abandon his heritage for a Western religion, but fortunately he had not gone too deep, so not suffered adverse consequences. He reverted to his traditional path and turned for inspiration to the Jagat Guru of Conchipuram, a genuine holy man who lived for nearly 100 years, 1894 to 1994, spending his life traveling round India teaching the Sanatana Dharma or ancient religion of the Vedas. The Kanchi Shankaracharya was a traditional guru, who was the 68th in line from the famous Advaita philosopher Sankara, and exemplified the best of his religion in contradistinction to most 20th century gurus, obvious exceptions like Ramana Maharishi aside, who seemed to be promoting themselves. He made no grandiose promises but simply taught love of the divine for its own sake. An amusing postscript to this story comes in the form of two young evangelical Christian missionaries who stayed at our guest house. They were sincere and enthusiastic but didn't fully appreciate the richness and depth of the Indian spiritual tradition. On one occasion they were with us when Neelakantan came round for morning coffee, as he sometimes did, and we introduced them before they left to visit a local church. A couple of days later we heard they had gone round to his house to try to convert him and his family, no doubt with the best of intentions, but you don't convert a Brahmin to Christianity. Neelakantan, normally a very courteous man, had lost his temper and thrown them out. I tried to explain to them that it was very bad form to tell a Brahmin that he worships demons, especially when you are a guest in his house, but they were fired by missionary zeal and didn't understand that Christ may be universal, but Christianity, especially the desacralized 18th century form they promoted, is probably not, which is why it will never catch on in India except in a limited form. It is too foreign.